Hello, I'm writer, director, producer Phil Zlak, manager, executive owner of Mysterian Film Group LLC. Our website is mysterianfilms.com. Check it out. Thank you very much, Natalie, for this invitation to be part of the live stream, which is a great honor, and I'm so overwhelmed with gratitude and happiness that our film Renneman was able to receive the Audience Choice Award 2022 in the Amsterdam Global Liftoff Film Festival, which grants filmmakers a great opportunity for showcasing their work of art. A huge thank you to everyone who supported our film. You made it happen, and I'm truly thankful. Thank you. I'm really excited, and my apologies that I wasn't able to attend the live streaming because of a previously set commitment. This gives me the added opportunity to sit down and streamline my thoughts, which, in light of the circumstances, I actually prefer. I'd like to say a big thank you also, Natalie, to you, Sharon, Sheila, and Ben, of course, for giving me the opportunity to enter my film this year as opposed to next. Thank you for selecting it for this year. It was serendipitous timing, and it's awesome. I want to congratulate all of the other filmmakers for their awesome art, especially the other Audience Choice Award winners for both feature and short films. Terrence, Brandon, Rudy. Yes. All right. Good job, guys. Yeah. Thank you, Ben, for putting together a valuable tutorial for new filmmakers, which helps them get out on the fast lane. Our film company's mission statement is Mysterian Film Group ignites consciousness through the well of the subconscious by showcasing stories that are all around us, yet reveal clandestine powers. Our 93-minute feature film Rent-A-Man is a mystery crime drama that takes place in the desert outside of Las Vegas between two men. One is a gangster played by John Marie D, the other a mysterious rent-a-man played by Jacob Baranski. They play a stylistically subtle yet dangerous game of cat and mouse while hiking Valley of Fire State Park until the ultimate future-changing twist ending. Since this is a mystery story, for more information, please head to our website, mysterianfilms.com, to read the synopsis. The inspiration behind Rent-A-Man, our feature, is multifold. In brief, I attended a writers' conference in LA back in 2015, where I met a fellow writer-director who later suggested I view the film The Sunset Limited. During that same time, I met with Buffalo 8 Distribution House with the request of getting a line item budget for a different passion project called Astro Sun. While there, I had a meeting and also chatted with one of their production experts, who recommended that I write a no-budget script for which I could more readily attempt to gain momentum for. The Sunset Limited film was a philosophical yet simple story set in a single room starring Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson. My writer-director friend proposed that if I write a no-budget script in a way, using the Sunset Limited as a sort of loose template, he might be able to direct it if finances were to come together. The concept has evolved to a screenplay titled The Ukrainian, but it's yet to get off the ground. So that's the first fold in our inspirational multi-folded cloth. The second fold is that I was looking to produce a script I wrote titled Adam and Eve Go Hiking, and had cold called a director asking if he'd come aboard in a package deal where he'd bring 3 Red cameras, his editing skills, and his directorial vision. We had loosely agreed on a weekly rate, and we were awaiting several months for spring so that the weather would allow us to film outdoors. Things fell through, mainly due to scheduling. At this point, after struggling for several years trying to produce a few of my scripts, where I actually garnered the interest of 3 directors without solidifying financing, and before that learning to screenwrite and create scripts on and off for almost 2 decades on spec, and even dabbling at UCLA, I really thought the gig was up. But then I visited the parking lot of a seafood grocery store in January. I was reminded of the first fold in our cloth, that if I could write a no-budget feature set in the desert, I might be able to afford to make it on my own and still film it during spring. This was purely a flash of inspiration, without much planning behind it, other than I had briefly worked on a directorial prep of my script Adam and Eve Go Hiking with the substantial help of YouTube. This time, following my creative inspiration turned out to have a mind of its own, meaning I had no true idea of the whole of what it would take to create a feature on my own. But as Julia Cameron wrote in The Artist's Way, A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity, and Betty Edwards wrote in Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, both added up to teaching me back when I was in high school that we have latent creativity in us. We just need to find it and use it. I struck a vein of golden creativity while visiting that seafood parking lot. When I returned home, I wrote and I wrote. Within 24 hours, I had completed 90+% of a first draft. I went over it for the second time in the next 12 hours and completed 96% of it to my liking, which was extremely unusual for me, as I'd taken years in the past to perfect scripts with feedback from multiple professionals within the industry. Then again, those stories weren't simply limited to 2 actors and were much more complex. So perhaps it wasn't exactly the same process, but someone once said that when a writer with years of trial and error finally writes something with a bolt of inspiration, it's due to over a decade of gathered knowledge and education bubbling up from the subconscious. Maybe so. The germination of the idea behind Rent-A-Man was spurred by a YouTube video about a real-life Japanese man who put an ad in the newspaper asking to be a rent-a-man for women needing a light social companion in public, someone to vent to and be heard by, maybe have a meal with, a drink, and go to the movies, and that's it, nothing more. At the same time, spoiler alert, I was reading about the news of Synchron, Synchron, a rival brain-computer interface of Neuralink, yeah, the one by Elon Musk, if you remember, being cleared by the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, to test a brain chip in humans that would open a Pandora's box. I also read journals about a brain-computer interface that, after many decades of perfecting, was now coming onto the public stage. Naturally, this new technology will bring speculation, curiosity, and a wide array of questions. It also helped inspire my twist ending as a cautionary tale of what may lay ahead for civilization. My main objective was to have one of my scripts come to life as a feature film, and hopefully in professional quality. I was yet to learn the domino effect of hurdles that I would be forced to relentlessly hurdle over myself if I was to see this vision to its fruition. Perhaps naivete was a blessing this time, as it gave me the courage to press on through. As Quentin Tarantino said, the best film school is making a film yourself. I knew I could imagine, therefore I could write. And I bet that with hours of study, analysis, and prep on my own, I could give directing a shot, even though it scared me. When it came to editing, I found an editor who was interested in the project for an industry rate. And that was without color correction nor sound added on. Both of those would be extra, thousands extra. I had prepped the footage at this point, which took 5 days of work following the editor's guidelines of delivery. When I added everything up, the cost exceeded my budget, and I knew it would run over budget even without those specific extra costs of color and sound. I didn't have any idea of what I was going to do. So I was in daily talks with my actor, Jomri, who kept suggesting that I do the edit myself, which I thought was absolutely ludicrous at the time. I had zero experience directing, zero experience with cinematography, except for having a recognized talent as a hobby photographer a couple decades earlier, and dabbled with basic YouTube video editing, which was merely merging clips together and not really what the nitty-gritty of editing is about. So I said, no way, are you crazy? Well, those phone calls continued, and Jomri was simultaneously encouraging me, which I'm grateful, extremely grateful for, and painting me into a corner, because I realized that if I didn't do the edit myself, there would be no film. I started researching computers, graphics cards, technical jargon. I started cold calling custom build shops and picking the brains and doing more research of this part of the folded cloth was the part that you wipe gravy and meat and potatoes off your chin with, because it's such an absolute mess. The learning curve was an absolute living nightmare. I stopped and asked myself, what have I gotten myself into? Then I called Jomri and asked him the same question. You know what he replied with? Well, if you buy a computer and do the edit yourself, you'll be able to edit the next film yourself and save on cost. First, I had to learn what I was doing, even the most basic level, and still attempt to deliver something of quality. Because I didn't want to just throw something together. I wanted it to feel like art, at least to me. learning how to prep as a director, then applying that knowledge to cinematography and attempting to make a film which has a visual aesthetic that will contribute toward the feeling of the film, that was no easy task, but I really believed maybe I could create some art. Learning to edit, that includes learning to manage the sound edit, which took the most time because of the wind being recorded outdoors. Also, learning to include music, sound effects, after effects, and creating a suspension of disbelief where the viewing audience is pulled into the story versus merely being a spectator was a great, great challenge. Editing was a very steep learning curve, and although at times the process literally felt like hell on earth, pardon the language, I'm relieved and unbelievably happy that I was able to solidify a finished product. Other than the story of Jesus being in the desert for 40 days and nights, I like to jokingly relate that this edit also took 40 consecutive days to complete, and it was definitely a trial. Probably the most painful, yet at the same time, the most satisfying part of the entire filmmaking process is being able to witness the edit come together in a way that it gels. I always tell people that even though I technically put in the work and did this edit, it doesn't feel like I did it on my own. Because at the time it felt like something helped me, whether we call it the universe, creative inspiration, ghosts, angels, I really don't know. But there's magic in the process that's unexplainable. Writers find the same to be true when they say they're in the zone and the writing flows out of them. After the edit, I had to learn about deliverables and gather everything that's required for a potential distributor, including taking the behind-the-scene photographs, designing them into a poster for the film, cataloging the music and images that I licensed, which is time-consuming, creating a trailer that's enticing, taking an interest in English captions and foreign subtitles, all in order to keep the budget low. I had to pile on as much responsibility onto my own shoulders that I could possibly learn to manage in a relatively short time. It's funny, prior to deciding to become a one-man army at filmmaking, I was gathering knowledge for options to resuscitate the Adam and Eve Go Hiking project after some scheduling conflicts with the director, and I called a casting agent as she was gracious enough to allow me to ask her questions. She inquired as to what I was doing, and when I explained, she replied that I shouldn't do everything on my own, to which I replied, believe me, I don't want to do everything on my own, but there was just no other way. There were just some of those hurdles that I just had gone over among a laundry list of additional ones, including buying props online, insurance, sitting with park rangers, emailing about permits, and fixing errors associated with all of the latter in time, and on that seemed to expand the more time marched on. The process was that of driving in fog. You may drive slowly and get somewhere, but you're unsure as to where you're exactly at, as you think the end of the road is just ahead, and it's always turning out that there's surprisingly more road to cover. I had never attempted professional cinematography, so I was very concerned about the strong sunlight shooting outdoors. I learned a little from watching director Terrence Malick at work and delved into understanding what a natural perspective might be like, of course all on YouTube. I researched filters and exposure settings and other technical jargon from a beginner's point of view that I now tend to forget off the top of my head. This is why I write everything down, but I had to scour the internet to find exactly what I thought I was looking for. So when I prepared for the shoot, I purchased some additional equipment that I never used because I wasn't able to apply both the camera and filter lens, for example, to a specific gimbal I had found. I tested the exposure of sunlight prior to going out in the desert with different filters, exposure settings, ISOs, etc. But when I got out into the desert to scout my locations, I found certain settings didn't work exactly as I had planned. So I was lucky to find a quick fix and make a small adjustment in order to avoid unnecessary glare. A lot of this, since I'm a technical beginner without experience, was dumb luck coupled with theory. I initially wanted certain locations within the state park, but when I sat down to discuss this with the park rangers, I was told where I could and couldn't film, which forced some adjusting that I think still turned out in the film's favor. A park ranger asked me if my actors were hikers, and I told him they weren't, but that I was, and he and the others laughed. So I explained that I'm going to make it seem as though they were hiking when in fact we'd use camera make-believe to only make it seem that They really were. In reality, being forced to utilize an out-of-the-way location a mile plus out helped create a quieter environment for the actors during our main shooting day, as there were tourists everywhere. Some of the film's locations dealt with filming between tourists walking back and forth next to us or in the background and spoiling scenes, which many of I learned to rescue in post-production, thankfully. Hey, and Jomri, he was the social butterfly. He was having a conversation with all these tourists and they wanted to have a photo op with him. I couldn't believe it. To get away from the tourists and to find landscapes that had some variety, I had my actor Jomri accompany me out to a few of these remote hiking trails for him to view firsthand and prepare himself mentally, in knowing that he'd need to decide if hiking over a mile in each direction was all right with him. I volunteered to carry his and my other actor Jacob's backpacks or any material they needed, but they wanted to carry their own stuff, which was such a plus to work alongside those guys because they're unafraid to get their hands dirty in so many words, and are willing to go the extra mile to make the art a success. I couldn't have made the film without them, especially Jomri, since he was relentless in calling me every day and asking for an update on the editing, which it's truly spurred me on. Those were intense working days, extremely challenging, and thank God Jomri kept things positive and forward-thinking. It's a lot to bear alone, even for someone used to long-term and unusually hard-working projects. I tip my hat to him. Thank you, sir. We were lucky that our most distant location was only a mile or so away from a restroom, as visiting it would require hiking 2+ miles round trip and take time away from our filming. The schedule was tight because Jomri had to drive from LA and had only a handful of days off, for which he skipped the first shooting day and had an uncle unfortunately pass away on that first shooting day. So things were very up in the air and anxiety was sky high for me. Thankfully, I flew Jacob out from Chicago and was able to film some of his scenes the first day, which was challenging for him as being new to acting and not having anyone else to bounce feedback off of him made him feel a little bit anchorless. But I assured him that I would do everything in my power to make his character look good on film if he'd entertain some of the maneuvers I was asking of him, such as the way he was to walk or the way he was to stop and turn. This was choreography for the scene, so it would look and feel natural. Otherwise, it felt off even if it was done in a normal way. Something that actors and directors need to trust one another on in order to try for the best option possible. And Jacob and I, we did it. We were on the same page, thank goodness. Many times, these are experimental facets that can't be prepped for, and the director will find out on the spur of the moment when they're filming. Observe and adjust is all that we can do. I'm really, really thankful for both of my actors. They were troopers, and I'm not sure that I could have pulled this off with anyone else. This was their first acting experience, and they both were sort of teetering about the idea, but I told them that I'd do all of the work, do whatever I could to make them feel comfortable, and I'd make them look great no matter what. We built trust and a spirit of adventure together. Jomri and Jacob both received the script ahead of time, and I spoke at length with both of them over the phone about their characters and who they are, and discussed it with them to see their perspectives on these characters and how else we could enhance them. I spoke with them about the wardrobe and why certain colors needed to be included and the ideas behind the opposition of perceived good versus evil, for example. I had several conversations with the actors in lieu of actual rehearsal, which had me on edge, yet turned out to our advantage. Jomri really loves to be in the moment as an actor, so for his character he believed it would be best to act as spontaneously as possible, and I think that the believability came across in his performance. I simultaneously was filming them with a camera, lifting up a tripod in one hand and keeping script continuity with the other while feeding them their lines and giving direction as to how to approach each scene. It was a circus for me, juggling things in my hands and topics in my mind. It's like you're really revving the engine, you know? Jomri really loves to be in the moment, and so what I like to do is I watched YouTube videos about directors speaking about their experience in the moment and what they were thinking about after they wrapped, and they all said that they had really strong emotional breakdowns. I couldn't understand why, until of course I was in the same position and it happened to me. Once everything is finished, that's when the dam really breaks. It's like you can finally feel the relief, you know? It's definitely an experience people need to have firsthand to truly relate to the pressure, details, and intensity of it all. And also realizing the attainment of a lifelong goal, which is amazing. Fortunately, Jomri was a past competitor of mine while working in Vegas promoting, hosting, and marketing nightclubs, parties, and restaurants. We got along well, and everyone knew everyone, so it was a friendly sales environment. True story, 5 minutes after finishing the script, I thought, who could I cast for this main part? Out of the blue, just then, John Marie called me to invite me to a mutual friend's birthday party. I was so excited to receive his call that I thought it couldn't just be coincidence, and I explained to him the story, character, and asked him right then if he'd ever wanted to be an actor. He replied by saying that in the past week he was contemplating trying to be in a TV commercial. After watching an ad for washing detergent with a middle-aged man, we both laughed, and I said this would be even better if he had an acting credit in a feature film. That would give him a leg up in commercials. He asked questions about the story and character, and after about 20 minutes conversing, he made up his mind and said yes. The next thing I did was call Jacob in Chicago, who I've known since childhood. Although we've seen each other once in 30 years, 10 years prior, and rarely spoke, I talked to him in the past about the Adam and Eve Go Hiking project over the phone, which he volunteered his services for if I needed to cast him. Thank you for that, by the way, Jacob. He had this aunt. Well, we kind of shared this non-blood related aunt who passed away recently, God rest her soul. And from time to time throughout the years, she'd reiterate that Jacob and I need to work together. And I guess she was right. I pitched the Rent-A-Man film to him, and he decided to come aboard, but he confessed that he didn't realistically think the project would pan out until I emailed him his airline ticket confirmation, and that's when it dawned on him that this was for real. He kept me on the phone while hopping around town, trying on different suit jackets and sending me selfies to see what I thought about his wardrobe, which ended up being better than I had imagined. I always tell both of them that this film project, despite the hurdles and the inexperience from my frame of reference, all of the mistakes wound up being blessings in disguise and made the film a ton better. I personally think that with the limited resources, crew, and knowledge, the feature turned out head and shoulders better than it could have otherwise. The actors see it from their own perspectives, but they weren't privy to the prep and edit, which with a full understanding would shed light on how lucky this entire bucket list venture turned out. I'm happy with the film and very grateful for their help and hope people will enjoy it and see the ending as a cautionary tale. Lastly, there's more to this story that can be pieced together, at least from a director's point of view, which I picked up from listening to both Kubrick and David Lynch speak about their visions of which influenced this picture. Rent-A-Man is still on a film festival circuit. Perhaps it might be viewed somewhere, and if fortune smiles, be nominated and win an award down the foggy road. I'm actively speaking with distributors and channel platforms in hopes that after the circuit ends, TVOD, SVOD, and AVOD will all be options. The next feature project that I'm focusing on is titled Synthetic Kale, Jacob and John Marie. I'm looking to cast again, but this time there will be a female lead with the majority of female supporting actresses, God willing. The logline is, after the kidnapping of her ex-lover, a woman turns plainclothes detective on the cold case only to run into a serial killer working for an off-the-books organization. I was inspired to write the lead character after a friend of mine, and the story is inspired by an article I had read while at the San Francisco airport this past year, and as a result, I imagined a set of consequences set in motion. If you go to my website, MysteriumFilms.com, you can click on Synthetic Kale from the top drop-down menu to see the starter GoFundMe page. Thank you again, Natalie, Ben, Sharon, and Sheila from the Liftoff Global Network for the opportunity to speak with you today, and a huge thanks to everyone who voted Rent-A-Man for the Audience Choice Award 2022. Thank God, take care, and until next time, see ya.